we're like at the edge of a huge transformation that nobody has understood how big it's going to be. I think I'm extremely, I don't want to say bullish because I'm really like, I'm not betting on anything. I think I'm seeing this very clearly. Like that's like AI is going to change the way we exist. It's going to change our societies. It's going to change the way we communicate. It's going to change the way we work. It's going to change everything. I think it's bigger than like the industrial revolution at the time.
You're listening to 0 to 1, the podcast where future unicorns get a start. Every week, we sit down with the founders actually building, the ones turning scrappy ideas into real-world companies. No fluff, no cliches, just raw insights, hard lessons, and the playbooks that VCs and top operators don't share publicly. We're your hosts, Jonathan, Matteo, and Gary, three friends obsessed with turning 0 into 1. Ready to build something legendary? Let's dive in. Joining us on 0 to 1 is Philippe Mizrahi, alias Phil, CEO and co-founder of Linkup. So before launching Linkup, Phil spent more than 4 years at Lyft, working across product, autonomous vehicle systems, and data infrastructures. Today, Linkup provides the web search infrastructure, powering AI agents at companies like KPMG, McKinsey, and Cohere. And in this episode, we dive deep into how Linkup was built and the lessons Phil learned along the way. What's up, Phil?
Hi, nice to meet you guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited about this episode. But before we dive in, can you maybe introduce yourself for our audience? Who you are, what's your background, and how did you end up as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, sure. So, and thanks for inviting me to the podcast. So my name is Phil. I'm one of the co-founders at Linkup. We do web search for AI models. We started the company a year and a half ago. And before that, as you mentioned, I worked at Lyft on actually search and autonomous vehicles. And my background before that is math and physics in France and machine learning in the US. And maybe a bit about Linkup. So web search for AI models, we index the internet. Essentially, we have like huge crawling and scraping pipelines, and then we have this sort of like secret sauce to organize the information of the internet in a special way to make it available for AI models to ask any sort of questions about anything when they need to ground their responses on data to make sure that they don't hallucinate, make sure the information, the answers they give are actually like super precise and super accurate. And we sell this to the application layer of AI. So any companies building AI agents from like lab, like Cohere, as you mentioned, all the way to fast growing AI applications like Legora or Polymarket or Artisan AI.
Amazing. You were kind of the first movers on agentic AI a couple of years ago. So you started in 2023, right? The company.
We actually started the company in 2024. When we started the company with Boris and Denis, the company actually was about something slightly different. So we had this vision of, okay, AI models, like a lot of people were working on the training at the time, like way less people at the time were working on the inference, what happens at inference time. So when you use the model, and especially what is the data that this model need to operate without like hallucinating answers or like without like making up data, making up stuff. But initially we thought that the problem was slightly different. So we started building sort of like a marketplace. And coming from Lyft, I think I had like a bias of like marketplaces like the solutions to a lot of things. But when we started building this marketplace and starting trying to sell this marketplace to the application layer of AI, we realized that what people needed was actually a search engine. And so this is when we started building the search engine, And that was in, like around the summer of 2024, so almost 2 years ago now.
And what was the moment that you realized that agents really needed like a fundamentally different approach and infrastructure around the search? Because there were already companies like, OpenAI, you could also, I think 2 years ago, you could already do like deep search. You had Perplexity already and on the Google API. But what was what was the moment that you realized you had to build something different?
So there were a few things. So first, like at the time, like OpenAI didn't have web search. Perplexity was like the only one that was doing this, but they were only doing this for their own use case. All the other applications, they would not use like the Perplexity web app. There was like Perplexity was an application. If you were building another application, you had to do it yourself. And there wasn't really a good way to do that because one, like Google actually didn't have a web search API. right? Like, so you have like scrapers of Google, but the performance is really shitty. And even if you were able to sort of like use this sort of like Google scrapers, what they give you is, you ask a question and the answer is a series of links, like what you have on the Google results page, a list of URLs or like links to pages. But as an agent, what you want is not links to pages because you're not going to like browse the web. What you want is content that you can like sort of like generate an answer based on that content. And so as a POC, actually, just to like show what you could do, initially what we built is sort of like we did that like in a couple of days to validate the pain that the form factor of the solution was the right one. Is we actually used one of these like SERP APIs that scrapes Google. And then we actually scraped all of these pages, all the links that were returned by these SERP APIs. And then we had like a pipeline to like sort of like clean up the content and sort of, like chunk and reorder all the content in a way that would make sense for AI models. And so package all that into an API call. That took us like 2 days. And we realized that actually what AI models want is again, like not a search engine like what Google has proposed for humans for 20 years, but something that returns content directly that AI models can sort of like base answers on. And so this was sort of like the second realization is that like, okay, well, clearly like the way it's been done for humans worked for humans, but like we had to rethink the whole thing for AI agents. And so after this like 2 days sprint to plug this out, we're like, okay, we have to rebuild a web search index from the ground up. And that was a huge task, obviously, right? Because we're pretty much saying, okay, let's rebuild Google. And as you can imagine, like Google is a pretty big thing. So from an engineering standpoint, we had to like embrace this challenge and it took us like more than 2 years to do that. And we're not done yet, right? Like the performance of the index is still something that we work on like every day. And like we're trying to have a deeper index, a wider index, a more performant index for our customers.
Super interesting. And I know you mentioned the mission was very ambitious at first. And maybe for our listeners, who want to tackle ambitious missions and who maybe want to start with an MVP, what is the thought process behind like launching the right MVP? How do you zoom out enough to understand how to create the right MVP in order to avoid overbuilding or being overwhelmed with, the mission itself?
First, you mentioned the word mission. I think that you have to really like find a that you care about, something that you think like directionally makes a ton of sense. And so for us, it was like, okay, like AI models need information. So that's a very simple statement. And I think that was like the bigger mission is like, okay, let's do that for them. Let's bring them information. Second, when you think about MVP, you need to think about, okay, what is the one thing that I need to test out? And how can I do that as quickly as I can? And let's try to like avoid all the rest that doesn't really need to be tested as much. So first, like essentially we're like, okay, like what product do we need to build? And then like, how can we build it? Like, and we knew that like building a web index was extremely hard, right? And it took us like more than 2 years to do that. We're not even done yet, right? But emulating something that sort of looked like an web index took us 2 days. And so we did it very, very quickly. And we had like, after 2 days, we had someone willing to pay for something. And I think that's like actually the only thing that means something is money in this situation, because it's very cheap for someone to tell you that your product is great. But having someone actually get their credit card and pay for something is a huge step. Even not a lot of money, but like for something is a huge step. And like before we work on that idea, we worked on another idea, this like marketplace idea. And like everybody was telling us this is a great idea. Like we actually raised money. We raised $3 million on that idea. And everybody's like, wow, this is a super cool idea. We did like so many like user interviews and like, my background was in product and I thought was like user interviews was the shit, But as long as you don't have anyone paying, then it doesn't mean anything, right? And so try to like isolate what is like the critical point that you need to test. Try to test this as quickly as you can, like removing all the rest, and try to get someone paying as fast as you can.
Did you have design partners, or were you like building in the wild or based on your intuition?
All the people that we try selling a marketplace ID to all these people, like they told us they are like interested about the marketplace idea, which is like the worst word, by the way. Like if you're building a startup and someone tells you that your product is interesting, like that's a very bad sign. All these people, they were all asking for this search engine idea. And so these were like the first customers we had when we pivoted. Like they're literally like asking for this. And so it was very easy for us to like work with them, test out the idea with them, test out the product with them, and do this in a quick iteration, like because literally they were asking for it in the first place.
Did you raise money? So you raised money pre-revenue on the first idea, which was the marketplace. And then you pivoted before. So how frugal were you when you raised the 3 million initially? Because you raised on a deck, like pre-revenue, like were you like, okay, this is the shit, like we raise money for the marketplace, let's go all in on it? Or you were still in like kind of frugal and like first get a proven traction before we scale? What was your thinking process and your growth process around it?
Yeah. So I mean, the timeline is sort of like this. Like we're like very sure about ourselves. Like we're like super, super sure. We raise money, and when you raise money, like essentially for like a whole month, you're going to be like the most assertive version of yourself. And you're going to like go to all the VCs and like be super assertive, like be super certain. And so for a whole month, you like brainwash yourself to tell that story in a very, very assertive way to folks that need to trust you. And so you cannot question yourself. And after the round, essentially you go back to work and you're like, okay, shit, I need to build something. And so then you go back to like questioning yourself all the time. And so once you like thoroughly reopen the question, like, are we building the right thing? Very quickly realize we're not building the right thing. And actually, like, I think we did the round like in July, August and September, we like tried building, and we actually built the first version of a marketplace product. In September, we're like trying to sell the marketplace product when people were coming back from vacation. And this is like when we realized that like everybody was asking for something different. And we pivoted like sort of like in between beginning and the end of October. And very quickly, we had a lot of traction in the other product, like the new idea. And so it was very easy for us to move from one to another. And in terms of like burn and like aggressivity in terms of like spend, well, it's not very easy to spend the biggest spend on a very early stage startup is like hiring, and hiring takes time, especially in France where like when you hire someone, like they don't join before 3 months. So you can only spend that quickly, you know? And so we're frugal, but like we're not trying to be frugal. We're just like making the right decisions for the company, and that meant at the time like trying to hire people, but like takes time. So
okay, so the fact that you had a préavis of 3 months was kind of a great thing in the end.
I mean, at the end of the day, like that's like the shittiest thing about the French market is like this is like the one thing, you know, like we operate differently in France and the US, and like that's the one thing I hate about like the French job market is like this 3 months préavis. It's the biggest thing that slows down startup right now in France, bigger than like taxes, whatever, you know, like it's this is the biggest thing that slows down startups like ours. And, you know, like we pivoted like pretty much right away. And so for us, it would have been better to be able to hire faster. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think like taking a bit of time, like in August, September, that year, like was pretty, like, I think gave us essentially like the distance to think about pivoting, because it's not an easy moment for a startup, right? Like pivoting is a very tough moment. In hindsight, like we made the right call, but at the time it was a much harder situation to understand essentially.
Super interesting. And now maybe to come back to the founding team, I know you mentioned Boris and Denis. Maybe if you wanted to introduce them for our listeners. And also why that specific combination was chosen in terms of co-founders. And something I've noticed is that maybe for Tavili and Exa, their co-founders were ex-software engineers. So just to try to understand what is the right combination when we want to create a product like Linkup.
Yeah. So very quickly about Boris and Denis. So Boris, his background is in aerospace engineering. He then went on to work at McKinsey doing strategy consulting, and then was leading innovation at a large group, Carrefour. And so he was really working on the application layer of AI and like how to essentially use AI within very concrete products. Denis, he's a software engineer. He built audio search engine. So essentially like Shazam that they sold to Spotify. So he was the first one that, like the only one out of the three that was, like sort of like had this repeat founder, experience, and, that actually worked on like search from a very technical standpoint, before. I had worked a bit on search, at Lyft as well, but like mostly for internal data on like pre-Gen AI technologies, when Denis had worked on like embeddings and vector search back in 2014, 2015, before it was like a huge thing. And so he had like deep knowledge on that. So just to explain a bit, like you have this like concept that maybe you guys covered before in the show, that is founder market fit. This whole idea that like the founders need to bring something to the table that gives them an edge in the market they're trying to address. And for us, I thought that, okay, well, I know a ton of things about marketplaces and we're trying to build this marketplace. And so I thought I had like great founder market fit. And then essentially we pivoted to search engines and like deploying search engines within AI applications. And so it turns out that like actually Boris and Denis had like way better founder market fit than I had, because Boris worked a ton on like integrating AI in applications, and Denis worked on literally like built a search engine, like a vector search engine before. And I guess this is like, we're very lucky, but a lot in startup is about luck. And so I guess that's life, right? And so that's like the team, like the folks we hired, like, after that were like very technical people, because we had to, like build a search engine from ground up, which is super, super hard technically. And we're just trying to hire like the first GTM people now. We actually hired the first like salesperson in Europe, first salesperson in the US, and first marketing person like very recently.
And maybe to bounce back on the product side, what did you think would be the moat about Linkup? And I saw you were heading towards the direction of building customized, personalized search infrastructure. Could you maybe explain this, what it is about, and taking this direction compared to other competitors?
So a bit about like the moat. So essentially like it's very, very hard to build a search engine. It takes a lot of time, a lot of capital. And if you don't reach a certain scale and a certain performance, there's no reason why anyone would use you instead of someone else, right? And so acquiring customers is very hard, because you build something that's very horizontal. There's no way you can like patch things up by having better like customer support, like better like hands-on grind, what you could typically do in a vertical B2B SaaS. And so that's why it's very hard to penetrate this market. The only reason why we're able to do this is that Google and Bing decided not to participate in this market. Building a web search engine for AI models is something that Google and Bing decided not to enter. Actually, they literally were in this market before, and went out of this market. They decided, okay, I don't want to sell my web search index to competitors in the AI space. Essentially, we're saying like Meta has great LLMs and AI models, but they don't have the search index I have. And so my asset is too strategic for me to like sell it to my competitors. And so they like shut down their APIs. And so at this point, we're like, well, like for like 20 years, like the two only players in the space were essentially decided not to play in this market. And so the barrier to entry and the minimum level of performance that you had to attain to be able to play in this market went dramatically down. And so very quickly, we're able to get a product to a place where like it was pretty shitty at the time, but like good enough for us to play in this market. And then we improve. And like now we're here, like there's still like some space to improve, but like we're like pretty good now. And so it was very hard for a player to enter this market now at the performance we had like a year ago, a year and a half ago, and play competitively against us. And so Tavily, Exa, Linkup, like all these new players, like they sort of like entered the market at the same time. And now it'd be pretty hard for another player to start entering the market now. So like the window has pretty much closed now. And so that is like a natural moat essentially, right? Because, this like technical moat that we've built is the first thing, like I would say that this other moat of like building data sets of how AI agents are using web search and, because it's a very different way of using web search than humans do. This is like another mode that we're building right now that is going to make a product even stronger, even more performant for this like new use case of AI agents. But this is a more nuanced, more like harder to understand mode that we're like, trying to build now. It's something that is like step 2 after this like technical mode.
Really interesting. When you were like pivoting on the the web API, weren't you competing against also Perplexity or other players like this? Those also your main competitors. I mean, you mentioned that Google just kind of laid down of the race. They kicked themselves out of the race on the web search, but Perplexity was already on it. Like, were those like some parameters you were also looking at when you were pivoting from the marketplace to the search API?
So just to clarify, like Perplexity now has an API version of a product, but at the time they didn't have one. And that's point number one. They released one like pretty late in the game. The second thing is like their API is like a very, very, very small part of the business. And so it's really like not their strategic priority to invest in that. And so that sort of like is helping us in the sense because it means that we don't compete against like the full might of like the Perplexity and like company, which is a big company like that we respect a ton. But like if we were like fighting against like head on, it would be a much harder fight. But they're not focused on that. They're focused on something else. And so it means we're fighting against like a small team within Perplexity. With this, we just do that. We just do web search. And so we're like super focused. And so we're able to like fight against like these bigger guys. And maybe just to add on a bit of thing, like on like what made us different, like right away is that we decided not to build web search in a way that was replicating what humans has been built for humans in the past. And again, like this idea that like, we're sort of like sitting at the intersection of like web search and retrieval augmented generation, so RAG for like the technical folks that are listening to us. Like RAG is this idea of like, okay, well, let's retrieve the content that AI systems need to generate answers. We're like sitting at the intersection of the two and essentially doing like RAG at the scale of the internet. And so the way we designed the product was different, and it was different from what Savvily was doing, from what Exa was doing, and we're like the only ones doing this in that way. And that was like way to go. And now like 2 years down the road, like everybody understands that, but like at the time, nobody did. And so it is sort of like a gamble that we made that helped us sort of like leapfrog because Savvily has started before us. And so we're able very quickly to become like much better than them just because we had sort of like taken that gamble of designing the infrastructure in a different way. And, you know, hindsight is 2020, but like, I think you have to take risks in this world of like early stage startups because otherwise like there's no way you're going to win against the bigger guys.
Yeah. And how did you acquire? So you mentioned that you got your first customers. Like people were saying, okay, we want to pay on the web API. Like what was the transition? So you were building the marketplace and you had people that were they were asking you for like web search when you were proposing the marketplace. Like how did you do the transition and get like your first paying customers, and who were they?
So it was like a startup in Paris. We're trying to sell them on this like marketplace idea. They're like telling us, oh, it's interesting, but like this and that, always like finding reasons not to pay. But essentially we're at some point like really digging very deep into their use cases and understanding the problems they had and like what they're trying to build. And we ended up on this like search ID and we're like, okay, like this is what we really need. Like this is what we really want. And this thing you're telling us about is sort of like secondary to this like search problem we have. And I was like, well, if we build that, like, would you pay us for that? And they were like, yes. And then you talk to another person and they're like pretty much telling you the same thing. And at some point you're like, okay, well, clearly like I have two paths. Like either I'm going to like divert a bit of my efforts and resources working on that problem, which is a gamble, but something that like maybe you're going to lie to us, but like essentially like these three people told us we're going to pay you if you build that. Or we just like keep building the same thing we've been trying to build and sell and it's not working as well as we thought. So essentially we said, okay, like let's have like one person in the team build that new thing as a POC. If that doesn't work, well, we have like time boxed it to like 2 weeks. If that works, that's great. And eventually we did that. We built that thing. We had like some folks that were like actually paying us for this. And so now we had two products. We had like the initial ID, the new ID, and no paying customers on the initial ID and like three paying customers on the new ID.
And this is about.
And at some point, like nobody wanted to work on the old ID anymore in the company. And everybody wanted to work on the new thing. And so like at some point, we just like sunsetted the old thing. And, you know, like we had this super cool, like super ambitious product that people were willing to buy. And on the other side, they sort of like pretty hard to, you know, like
marketplace. You have the chicken and egg problem. And then you have people that are willing to pay. This reminds me a lot about how I pivoted from my first company, which was also an HR recruiting marketplace, to my business, which is basically FD as a service, because we were basically since the API of GPT-2 came out, like we were automating all our workflows internally, and like we had like about 20 companies that were using our product. No one wants to. None of our users, let's say, wanted to pay, but we talked to friends, and they were like, "Oh, this is super cool what you guys are doing like internally. I'm willing to pay you to do it for my company." And so that's how it like was like as a first founder, you know, when someone says, "I want to give you money," you were like, "Okay, I'm taking it for sure."
Yeah, at the end of the day, like you have like a bigger mission and a bigger vision, and you know, like within the bounds of like what you want to work on, you just follow the money. You know, like at the end of the day, that's like the easiest sign of you doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something interesting about like different paths to explore different paths. Would you recommend like this strategy for our listeners, you know, who might be interested 100% about one idea, but also who might be like missing on some good opportunities because they were too stuck on this idea?
So I think it's very important. I mean, my thinking on this is that it's very important to keep exploration, you know, like mix. Because if you never explore, you're going to just be stuck on something. And it might be a very suboptimal idea. It might be something that works well, but like not the best thing. And so we always try to keep like a mix of like exploration, exploitation. Maybe in the beginning, you want to explore more because you're not sure. And it's good in the beginning to have like a larger share of trying out different stuff. And then as you start to feel the pull in one direction, you can sort of like focus on that and lower the rates of exploration. There's one thing though that is quite important is not all the explorations are the same. And so it's very easy for you to explore other ideas that have the same buyer and same ICP because you're essentially expanding your whole day, like talking to customers, trying to understand the needs, trying to understand the problem. And so it's very easy for you to say, okay, I'm going to try this new thing, but it's like targeting the same people. And so it's going to be very easy for me to like test out this new idea and like ask them, okay, guys, like, would you like to work on like trying to like buy this new thing that it built? Like, would it be interesting to you guys? But it's very hard. It's super, super hard to like go and talk to like a whole different user group about something you've built because it's a very diverting in terms of mental share and like trying to understand the needs of a very different group of people. And so, for example, like one thing that we haven't done yet that I really want to do because I think it's very cool is doing the sort of dark web version of Linkup. So right now we index the web, but there's like the web is actually like a super small share of what's out there. And there's this whole sort of like huge source of information that is the dark web that is sort of like this like Far West kind of thing where a lot of things happen. And from a security standpoint, you have a lot of like security companies that are trying to understand like this underworld. And there's no offer, there's no like perplexity for the dark web. And so I'm very excited to like try to explore that idea and see if there's something out there. But if we do that, we'd be selling to like security companies, which we don't really do right now. And even though like from the technical standpoint, it'd be very easy for us to build that product, I sort of like refrain working on that because I know that it would be a pretty strong change in focus on like the people we talk to. And so I know I want to do that at some point, but like when we have more resources and more time to devote to that product, because you know, on the other hand, like we're building like a shit ton of like web search APIs, like we do search, like fetching, crawling, all that stuff. It's very easy because you sell to like the same people that just need to connect the agents to the internet some ways.
That's also a little dangerous, like building a web search on the dark web. That's a bit kind of dangerous for you.
It's a whole different thing, right? Like you have like security concerns and so on and so forth. But like at the end of the day, the one thing that is making this whole thing, so like making us deprioritize this whole thing is like you're not selling to the same people.
Now, going back on the go-to-market side, because building an API is much more different than just building a SaaS, you know, just like people you're selling to. So you're mostly selling to technical people, right? So what's like, how do you go from 0 to 1, let's say, building an API based business? So you're basically selling the data or the data points to technical people. So should you focus first on the building community? Should you first focus first on building the use cases that you showcase through, I don't know, some GTM workflows through Clay and whatsoever? What was the main, let's say, your main way of acquiring clients and the pipeline you're building today?
Yeah. So, you know, back a year ago, we had to explain to people like why they needed web search. it was like still in very early days of agents, and you had like way less people building agents, and most of them were like not leveraging the full like optionality that agents had. And for them, web search was like something that would come at like V1 or like V2 of the agents, and they're like still at the V0 of the agents. Now, like everybody knows what value brings, like what brings. And so we have way less these situations where like we have to explain like what value web search brings. And now it's more about, okay, why Linkup versus others, right? Versus Tabidi or Exa. And so we have like great responses to that, but it's a very different motion. At the time, what we were trying to do is essentially explain to people what you can build with Linkup. And it was about, okay, well, clearly like there's some very cool stuff that you can do only if you connect Linkup to web search, or like, so only if you connect your agent to web search. And we give you like sample code, like, like code snippets that you can easily like copy paste into your product. And that uses Linkup's web search. And we show like, okay, what happens if you don't use web search? What happens if you use web search? That's like sample code with Linkup integrated. We give you like free API credits, and you go ahead and you implement that in your product. And that was sort of like the way to go. We had a Reddit at the time that was like a good way to like reach out to users. Yeah. We were like trying to find subreddits that were, like about agents and people trying to build agents and people like struggling, facing hallucination issues or like trying to build something and like struggling to build it without web search. And we came in and we're like, okay, you guys should use web search. And by the way, you can use Linkup. It's a great product. And we give you free API credits. And it was a good way to like reach out to like the early adopters community, very technical people that were like willing to try new stuff. And this is like the way you start. And now we like talk to like huge companies like worldwide. And the discussions are more about like procurement, like how can we support them, like SLAs, QPS, and all that.
How important was the game theory around your pricing model? Because like when you're basically competing against other API providers, usually it's like the one that's the cheapest at the best, with the best performance that wins. So how do you like kind of compete with like Exa and all the others?
So it's very interesting because right now actually the prices are going up.
Okay.
It's very weird, but like we see that our competitors are like raising the prices. We just kept that flat. We actually didn't change the price. We did change the price at some point because we went from like euros to USDs.
Okay.
But that was like, we tried to like stay as flat as we could. And like really like we're not targeting the price sensitive customers. The way we position Linkup is much more like the production grade products. You will typically work with Linkup if you have very high needs of accuracy, of performance, of recall, precision, of latency, of load. And you might have like needs in terms of customization of the index. You might have needs in terms of local data processing in Europe, US, like different regions. And so this is why we will come work with Linkup. And like, if like the CPM is at 5, 6, or 7 at the end of the day, like the people work with, like this is not the first thing you care about. And so a year ago, essentially, like these like early adopters were like a bit more price sensitive. And so we just decided to like have a very simple price. At the time, like folks were pricing their APIs like a very complex scheme of like monthly fee plus like per query fee plus like per token fee. And honestly, like it was hard for us to understand our competitors' pricing because we're trying to like benchmark it and like try to like be not too expensive, not too cheap. And we're like, okay, fuck this. Let's just do something very simple, like flat fee, like just like 0.05 cents per API call. That's it. Like very simple, dumb and easy. And so we try to be like competitive, very simple. And so, we scrapped any sort of like monthly fee that Tabby has, for example. And I think that played in our, like made it easier for us for our users to use Linkup because it was easier to understand and super affordable. And now we have like obviously like for the enterprise company, like they have like very specific needs. And so the pricing is very much adapted to them, but it's a whole different discussion.
Super interesting, especially on the angle of using your own product to help you execute and gather information. But maybe back on the community angle. So just to better understand, are you still focused on the, I will say, general developer community or mainly enterprise use cases?
So
clarify.
You have a free tier. You can use Linkup for free. You have actually like thousands of calls per month, like for free, and for as long as you want. And it's the same performance as like the paid product, right? So if you like tinkering with AI and like building stuff, you can do it for free. But then like if you want a very intense, like super high performance, like super complex needs, we can build that for you. And this is something that we do like day in, day out. And you know, like we work with like the biggest banks in the world. We work with like the biggest industrial companies in the world. We work with like the biggest AI companies in the world. And obviously these people have like super specific needs and super like intense needs. And this is where we do the best. This is where we differentiate the most. And this is where like working with Linkup makes the most sense. If you have like very basic needs, like any provider will do. If you have very specific, very sort of advanced needs, this is where you should work with Linkup.
So you realized that it was more interesting to focus maybe on enterprise with advanced needs rather than building a product for everyone. Is that correct?
I think it's two things. One, from a business standpoint, it's a way to differentiate. And so you have to find your niche within the bigger market. And two, like from a technical and product standpoint, I think we just love like solving like very hard technical problems. And for us, it was more fun to like solve very hard problems and just like build something that is like just okay. And if you want to do something very complex, well, then you need to spend a lot of money to build it. And so it needs to make sense from business standpoint. And so you essentially need to go for like the people that are willing to pay for something that is very hard to solve, you know? And so this is why we went this direction.
And how much budget are you allocating to maybe marketing? Because the funny story is that I discovered Linkup while I was doing a hackathon in New York. It was back in 2025. So do you think it's important for our listeners to, you know, maybe really think deep about the marketing angle as much as the benefits of the product?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I think it's very easy for people like myself to just work on the product. But at the end of the day, your company is not a product. The product is just like it's a very important part of your company, but it's like just a part of your company. And so you need to like take some, you know, like take a bigger picture for this whole thing and think about, okay, like who's your customer? Like what's your way to talk to them? Like what's the way to reach them? And where do you want to reach them? Like understand where they hang out, like how they talk, how do you get to them? And so I think like, and once you found that, you can decide to allocate money to that. And if you think that's going to like sort of like speed things up. But you know, like for us for a long time, we're like not sure exactly like what is the niche that we want to go after, like how to talk to them. And so if you don't know that, you can like spray and pray, but it's going to be very expensive. And most of the time, like in the early stage, you don't have like money to waste. And so you cannot just like spray and pray. And so you need to do the work of understanding like what is the easiest, like best way to reach these people that I want to sell to. And you have like so many different channels. So for example, like one thing we tried at some point was working with influencers, like tech influencers. And we realized that actually that it was a very bad way to market our product because, well, turns out like that when you're a very serious company that will like require like accuracy, low latency, performance, like super high, like security bars, well, you don't go around and like on TikTok or like on YouTube to listen to like tech influencers that are going to just like market random products. And so we decided to not do that anymore. You know, like it's okay to try stuff and see what works. You know, at the end of the day, you have a lot of different levers you can pull, and it's okay to have this like trial and error. It's better to try stuff and decide that, okay, clearly it doesn't work than just to be waiting too much in deploying capital and like going actually like much slower than you should just because you're afraid of spending money.
Interesting. And now we can maybe switch a bit more into the operational part. So now you say you operate around between New York and Paris. Is that right?
Yeah.
So you opened the office in New York a couple of months ago. You had your first sales here, right? In New York?
Yeah, so we opened the office in this winter, like a few months ago. We had like presence before that, but we're like mostly traveling all the time. And so we had someone who decided, okay, we need to be like have an actual office here. And we're opening San Francisco as well. The idea is to keep right now like the technical team in France. We'll have like our first technical hires before the end of the year, but like before you reach a certain scale in terms of technical team, it's better to have like the whole team together. And so, yeah, I think at the end of the year, we'll have like a second pod in the US.
Okay, interesting. And how do you operate between those two, like in terms of organization? Like, were you always in English internally? Like, what's the main challenges?
Yeah, always English, and you end up in like in weird situations where like you only have like one. We have a few like non-French speakers in the Paris office. But yeah, we have sometimes folks that just like, speak French at the coffee machine, and then there's someone coming up and they have to like switch to English, and not all of them has like perfect English, but like everybody's like strong enough to communicate very clearly and efficiently. So it's not a problem.
Okay, cool. And now I have also some questions, because like we always talk about like the strategies, like going from 0 to 1, but we don't talk about like the execution, which is the most important part, I think. Because how did you learn how to become such an operator? Was it at Lyft that you got all the playbooks, let's say, on how to manage people, how to hire people, how to build playbooks? Like, if you had maybe one tip to give to people starting a company, what would it be, especially now in the AI era, in terms of management and execution?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think my experience at Lyft was very interesting, and I learned a ton. But it was also learning to trust myself, and being able to make decisions for a whole group, and so like build a vision that makes sense, articulate it in a way that is easy to grasp for everyone, and just trusting myself enough to like just like tell a group of people, let's do this, and let's do it together, and like set a challenging but achievable objective for everyone. The way you build a product now has nothing to do with the way you built a product 2 years ago. And actually, when you talk to people in tech, like you realize that like the way you build a product now has nothing to do with the way you built a product 3 months ago. And so like obviously the way we build product at Lyft, like back in 2023, has nothing to do with the way we build product now. And so the way you execute is completely different. In terms of execution, I don't have like a silver bullet to share, but like you need to, it's also like very hard as a founder, because you need to do everything. You need to like build the product. You need to think about go to market. You need to think about hiring, and then you have like all the operational bullshit that comes into play, like like all the paperwork, all the admin stuff, all the shitty things. And for me, there's continuously like 2 things you need to do in a company. There's like the stuff that really matters, and the stuff that doesn't matter. And then there's a urgent and not urgent stuff. And so it's like a 2x2 quadrant where like and so you want to like spend the least amount of time on the stuff where it doesn't matter. And like the easy way to think about like, doesn't matter or not? It's like you think 2 years down the road, and you're like, okay, like, would it make like, is Linkup or like your company going to succeed if I do this well or not? And like, if the answer is no, well, don't spend too much time on that then. It's very easy, For example, like creating this, like handling the rights, like doing things properly for like the Swile accounts for your employees. You have to do it, right? But like, if you spend too much time working on that, well, clearly it's going to make you win or lose. And so it's probably not the best use of your time. So if you can like delegate that to someone else, that's great, because you as a founder should always work on like the most critical things for the company. And then you can sort of like allocate between like short-term and long-term stuff, like, but you only should work on like the most important stuff. And something that is like a must do, but really not going to like make or break your company, then you should try to like have someone else do it.
Mm-hmm. A great book I've read is called The Essentialist. It's amazing read to learn how to cut the bullshit and focus on what matters. But I know we are almost short on time. I wanted to ask you this question because you are one of the best person in the AI space that really understands all the different components. And I wanted to ask you, about the future of AI, where it is heading, and if we can make a comparison between, for example, Amazon and Google back in the days, or Amazon in the web era. Where do we stand right now in this era, and how do you see it evolving?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think we're like barely scratching the surface. I think that like we're like at the edge of a huge transformation that nobody has understood how big it's going to be. I think I'm extremely, I don't want to say bullish, because I'm really like, I'm not betting on anything. I think I'm seeing this very clearly. Like that's like AI is going to change the way we exist. It's going to change our societies. It's going to change the way we communicate. It's going to change the way we work. It's going to change everything. I think it's bigger than like the industrial revolution at the time. And like, I think that we are like, nobody really understands how it's going to impact us. Nobody can like say they have a great picture of like where it's headed. And that's actually why we want to be, like where we are today. We're going to be like building the rails of this future. We're going to be like building a key part of the infrastructure of this future. And this is actually why I think what we do matters. Because at the end of the day, like if you take a step back, like what is Linkup? Linkup is a company that tries to make sure that agents have all the data they need to make the right decisions. And right now it's easy because like decisions are like AI, most of the AI agents are like very like glorified chatbots, right? But like as they like become smarter, become more independent, become more, powerful, then the actions they take have more impact on us. And this is where Linkup becomes super important because you want all the AI agents that impact us to act knowingly of like right tasks, right? And so like we have to start now because like in a couple of years, we need our product to be very, very powerful so that AI agents can make the right decisions.
And if you had to start a company like in 2026, aside Linkup, what would you start? Like if you had to attack another big problem in the market or in the AI market, something that would have a moat.
I think I would probably find a problem that I love in an industry, like a sector that I love. And then I would probably just like build a company from the ground up, but not an AI company, just a company, and operate it in a way that, is like powered by AI, but like not an AI company. I would not build a software company. I would build a company. You have like a ton of like law firms or like banks and stuff. And so you have one of the customers is Legora. They're building a software for lawyers. But if I had to start a company today, I would build not a software for lawyers. I would build like a law firm, and I would be like powering this company with AI. But like, I think like all the sort of like incumbents and like the large players in this, in all the different industries, like they have like huge sort of like moats, but I think all of these moats will break at some point in the near future. It doesn't mean that we'll not win, but I think it's going to be so like an open window for like new entrants to come in and challenge these guys. And so instead of building a software for finance, I would build a bank. Just go ahead and build a bank, because you can be so much more powerful if you're like agile with AI. You can challenge all these incumbents and move fast and like become a big company and capture much more value than just building software.
It's more like the car. So you want to build a car like Ford. So you want to build the whole new instead of things like things for the horses and the caravel. I don't know if it's in English, but so you want to build the car directly. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. If you want to build a car. And I think you can do it with AI like in a much more efficient way than anybody has done before. And so just go ahead and do it. Like if you want to be like a friend of mine actually building a geology company to find like new rare earth and new metals and stuff. And with AI, you can have like such an edge in the way you detect stuff, data process the whole thing. But why not stop there? You can build the whole thing, And so I think it's the best time in the history of startups to build stuff because you can just go super, super fast and be super, super ambitious and like, like challenge incumbents like nobody has done before.
And you think, maybe I don't know, because before, people wanted first to acquire experience in big companies to gain credibility or skill set. If you were like graduating from college or if you were 22, would you still want to get that experience or would you be confident enough to, build a startup from scratch using whatever tools?
I think we all have different levels of maturity. Like when I was graduating from college, I don't think I was mature enough to build my own thing. And I think I was a bit frustrated because I was seeing like some of my friends do it, and I was a bit restless, and I really wanted to go ahead and do it, but I felt like I wasn't ready. And then I was in this very comfortable job at Lyft where like I was making a ton of money and I was like not working as much as my founders' friends. And so it took me a bit of time to like get out of my comfort zone and go ahead and launch the company. But at the end of the day, like this was in a pre-AI world where like the way you build the software was not evolving as much. And so I was trying to build experience to like become better founders down the road. But like all the things I've learned, Lyft, there's only a very small fraction that still matters today, right? In the way you build the software, the way you build product and so on. I think it's really a question of like, when are you ready? And like the easiest way to gain experience to build on how to build a startup is by building a startup. And like in the best case scenario, that happens and like you can actually make it and that's successful. In the worst case scenario, you fail. And so you need to be comfortably set up financially and you need to be like safe and really understand deeply what happens if you fail. But if you mentally understand what happens if you fail and that's okay to you, then actually the best way to learn how to do a startup is to do a startup.
And now some questions to wrap up the episode. What's your favorite tool, app, or framework that you're using daily? So
One like Claude and that's pretty much it.
What is the promo code for free Linkup tokens for life for our listeners?
You can DM me on socials, and if your product is very cool, I will give you a lot of credits.
Joke aside, what is your favorite AI newsletter that you consume every morning?
There's one that I actually like. I forget the name all the time, but I think it's called TLDR or something.
It's a cool one. What's your most unconventional opinion around AI?
I'm like one of these, I'm a maximalist. I think that AI is going to change the world by a lot. I'm not the only one who thinks that. I'm also like not a doomer. I think it's going to change the world for the better. But I think we're going to go through like very hard times. And especially in social democracies that have like a huge safety net and that have like a large part of, like white collar workers. And I think that the way we handle the transition as a society is going to be super, super important. And that's the case in France. That's the case in other countries. I'm sitting between like this, like doomers that think that AI is bad and these like techno-maximalists that think that AI is great. I'm like, okay, AI is great, but like in the long term and like in the short term, we need to like make sure we do things right, because otherwise it's going to like be super, super hard for societies to like remain in like a stable situation. And so the next 5 years are going to be super, super important. And so when you think about the next general elections in the US, 2028, in France, 2027, we need to be pushing for AI being part of the discussions. And I think right now, like the political, the political frontrunners are not understanding enough. They don't understand enough like these challenges, and so we need people to like stand up and explain that to them and make sure that there's something we discuss, because as a society we need to make tough choices to make sure this transition happens smoothly.
Do you believe in the UBI, universal basic income?
It's just like a way to package taxes. It doesn't change anything. It's a marketing thing. At the end of the day, it's like how you distribute money. Like you tax on one side and then you redistribute on the other side. And so UBI is just a cool marketing thing, but like it doesn't change anything. And so I think it's great to talk about this, but like it's a bit of a waste of time.
What is the last advice for founders that you want to give?
I think honestly, just like have fun. It's like you're going to work so much, you're going to like grind so much, it's going to be like ups and downs. It's going to be hard. Maybe you're going to fail. You're most likely going to fail. Like I'm most likely going to fail. I don't know. But like try to have fun, because otherwise like what's the point,
Have fun and build skills. Otherwise it's hard.
Like the skills will come. Like if you work on the right things, like the skills will come and that will compound. But like if you're miserable every day, you should probably not do what you're doing and you should probably do something else.
Yeah, for sure. And what's a guest we should host on the podcast?
I have a lot of like founder friends, and so if you want to have founders, I can reach out.
If you have one, you have to choose, and you don't want to make your other friends jealous, and you want to make your other friends jealous. Who is it?
Yeah. I'll let you know. But I mean, if you have folks in mind, like I don't want to put anyone on the spot and commit them to anything.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Phil. It was a great discussion, super interesting, and we're super excited. I think our audience will love it.
Awesome.
That's it for this episode of 0 to 1. If this gave you an idea, an edge, or the courage to build, send it to your friend, founder, or your team. Follow us, subscribe, and drop us a DM if there's someone you want to hear next. Until then, keep building, keep shipping, and go from 0 to 1.